There comes a moment, silent yet unmistakable, when life begins to tremble beneath your feet. Relationships feel uncertain, doors begin to close, familiar comforts fade away, and everything you once depended on starts to move. It's in this chaos that most people panic. They cling to what's leaving, thinking they're losing everything. But in truth, it's the divine hand rearranging your reality to prepare you for what's next. Alan Watts once said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." What you perceive as instability is often God clearing the path for blessings that cannot enter a cluttered life. When God is about to bless you, the shift rarely feels like a blessing. It feels like confusion. The people who once resonated with your energy may drift away. The habits that used to comfort you will no longer satisfy your soul. Even your own desires begin to feel foreign. This is not punishment. It is purification. Life is moving you out of alignment with what no longer serves your higher purpose. You are being tuned, like an instrument, to vibrate at a frequency that matches what you've prayed for. The divine works in paradoxes. You ask for peace, and chaos comes first. You ask for strength, and weakness reveals itself. You ask for love, and loneliness deepens, because to receive what you seek, you must become the person capable of holding it. Every shift, every loss, every silent night is part of the unseen choreography that leads you to your expansion. As Alan Watts would remind us, the more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. God is not making your world collapse. He's making it alive again. When everything around you starts to change, don't resist. The ego screams for control, but the soul whispers, trust. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving in to the rhythm of divine intelligence that knows far more than your anxious thoughts. What looks like endings are often entrances disguised as exits. You are not being abandoned. You are being redirected. So, when everything begins to shift, remember, blessings rarely announce themselves with calm. They arrive through the storm. Life is not falling apart. It's falling into place. And those who can remain still, even as the ground quakes beneath them, will soon realize that every collapse was simply the sound of a new world being built beneath their feet. When everything around you begins to fall apart, your first instinct is to resist. You try to hold the pieces together, terrified that what is leaving might never return. But in the philosophy of Alan Watts, resistance is the very root of suffering. Life, he would say, is like water. It flows naturally, effortlessly, without force. The moment you try to control its direction, you create turbulence. So when God is about to bless you, the shift will often come disguised as disruption. The people who walk away, the plans that collapse, the sudden stillness that makes no sense, all of it is the current of divine reorganization moving through your life. Watts taught that our greatest illusion is the belief that we are separate from life itself. We imagine that things are happening to us, when in truth, everything is happening through us. What you call loss is often the universe removing what your soul has already outgrown. That relationship that fell apart, that dream that didn't work out, they were never failures. They were seasons, meant to awaken a deeper part of you that cannot emerge until the old structure dissolves. When you understand this, chaos no longer feels like punishment. It feels like the whisper of transformation. Most people never experience true growth because they refuse to let life rearrange them. They pray for blessings but cling to the comfort of the familiar. Yet, as Watts would remind us, to hold on to life is to destroy it. The divine cannot expand you while you're gripping the edges of who you used to be. You cannot step into what's meant for you while still defending what's meant to end. This is the paradox of spiritual growth. To receive more, you must first let go of everything that no longer aligns with who you're becoming. It's in the moments of uncertainty that faith becomes real. Faith isn't believing everything will stay the same. It's trusting that change itself is sacred. When God begins to shift your surroundings, it is not chaos. It is choreography. Every event, every emotion, every uncomfortable silence is part of a larger dance between your soul and the divine. Alan Watts often compared life to music. It's not something to reach the end of, but something to be played, felt, and experienced. You're not being punished by the rhythm. You are being invited to move with it. And when you finally stop resisting, you begin to see the hidden order within the disorder. You notice that the job you lost made room for your purpose. The person who left created space for deeper love. The door that closed wasn't rejection, it was redirection. In this awareness, peace returns, not because life has calmed, but because you have. You've stopped fighting the current, and in that surrender, everything begins to flow again. Every blessing requires space, and space is rarely created gently. Before every expansion, there is a shaking, a spiritual earthquake that breaks apart what cannot hold the weight of what's coming. Alan Watts often said that security is an illusion, a concept we invent to escape the reality of constant change. But when the divine wants to elevate you, it dismantles the illusion. It exposes the false foundations you've built, relationships based on fear, goals built on ego, and comfort zones disguised as peace. Everything stable begins to tremble because your next chapter cannot rest on the same soil as the last. During this shaking, you will feel lost. You'll look around and wonder why people are leaving, why nothing feels right anymore. The truth is that your vibration is shifting. You're no longer compatible with the same patterns, the same conversations, the same energy. What once felt like home now feels too small because you're outgrowing the life you once fit into. Watts believed that growth is not the addition of something new, but the shedding of what is false. God is not adding weight to your soul. He's removing everything that keeps it from rising. Pain becomes sacred when you stop labeling it as wrong. The discomfort you feel in times of transition is not life being cruel. It's life being honest. It's revealing the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be. Alan Watts called this the wisdom of insecurity, the recognition that only by letting go of control can we encounter the truth of existence. When everything you've depended on starts to slip away, it's not abandonment. It's awakening. The divine is asking, will you still trust me when there is nothing left to hold? The more you try to control the process, the longer the shaking lasts. Imagine a tree clinging to its leaves in autumn, refusing to let them fall. It would never know the beauty of spring. Likewise, when you cling to what's dying, you delay your own rebirth. Life removes things not to punish you, but to prune you. It cuts away branches that can no longer bear fruit, so that your essence can grow stronger. And though it hurts, it's the pain of progress, the ache of a soul being expanded by grace. So when everything around you begins to shift, stand still at the center. Don't rush to rebuild what's crumbling. Don't chase after what's leaving. Breathe, observe, and allow the transformation to unfold. The ground beneath you isn't falling apart. It's breaking open. Something is emerging from the cracks. Something purer, freer, more aligned. That is what the blessing feels like before it arrives. Unfamiliar, disorienting, but utterly divine. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. To many, it feels like defeat, a surrender to circumstances beyond control. But to Alan Watts, letting go was the highest expression of intelligence because it meant understanding the nature of reality itself. Life is fluid, impermanent, constantly in motion. To cling is to fight the current of existence, and that fight is what breeds suffering. When God is preparing to bless you, He first teaches you how to release. Not because He wants you to lose, but because He wants your hands to be open when the blessing arrives. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to the rhythm of something wiser than your plans. It's recognizing that your control was always an illusion, and that the universe has never been against you, only ahead of you. Watts used to say that trying to control the future is like trying to control the wind. The moment you stop fighting what is, you rediscover peace. You see that every detour was deliberate, every ending intentional, and every silence sacred. Life is not random. It is perfectly orchestrated to bring you closer to awareness, even through pain. When you begin to trust this flow, miracles appear in the ordinary. People arrive at the right time. Opportunities surface without effort. The weight that once pressed on your chest begins to lift, and in its place, clarity rises. The divine doesn't need you to strive. It needs you to align. Alan Watts would often speak of the effortless effort, a state in which you act without strain, create without fear, and live without resistance. In this space, blessings don't have to be chased. They gravitate toward you, naturally, like rivers flowing toward the sea. The act of letting go is not a one-time decision, but a daily devotion. Each day, you release the need to know what's next. You surrender the fear that things are not happening fast enough. You forgive the urge to measure your progress by human standards. This is where true transformation begins, in the quiet acceptance that life unfolds in divine timing, not yours. And though it may feel slow, it is perfectly synchronized with the maturity of your soul. In this trust, life becomes lighter. You start to notice how every fall was a preparation for flight. You realize that what you thought was the end was only a bend in the path, a divine redirection towards something far more aligned. The more you release control, the more you find yourself exactly where you need to be. You are no longer swimming against the current. You are being carried by it. And that, as Watts would say, is the moment when living becomes effortless. There's a peculiar stillness that comes after life has shaken everything loose. It's that quiet, uncertain space between endings and beginnings, a void that feels both empty and full. Alan Watts called this the fertile void, the place where the old self dissolves and the new self has not yet emerged. It is here, in this silence, that God prepares the ground for the next chapter of your existence. But most people panic in this space. They mistake the stillness for stagnation, not realizing that it is the womb of transformation. The silence is not absence. It is incubation. It's the universe holding its breath before the next inhale of creation. You may feel disconnected, unmotivated, unsure of where you're headed, but this is divine design. Watts believed that when we stop trying to fill the silence, life can finally speak to us. The blessing that is coming cannot be heard in the noise of constant striving. It requires the quiet of surrender, the humility of waiting, the patience of faith. It's in this stillness that the soul heals. The mind slows down, the emotions settle, and the deeper truth begins to rise to the surface. You begin to see that the loss wasn't punishment, but purification. The waiting wasn't delay, but alignment. This is the paradox of divine timing. Nothing happens when you want it to, but everything happens when you're ready. The silence between shifts is not a void to fear, but a sanctuary to trust. In this space, your ego dies a little, and that's a good thing. The ego thrives on noise, on plans, on certainty, on labels. But the soul thrives in mystery. And so, in the quiet, you are invited to rediscover who you truly are without the titles, the roles, the stories. Alan Watts often reminded us that you are not a stranger in the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself. In this stillness, that truth becomes more than a concept. It becomes a felt reality. And when you stop rushing to rebuild what has fallen, the universe begins to rebuild it for you, not according to your desires, but according to your destiny. From the silence, something sacred is being shaped, something purer than before, something that could only emerge from the emptiness you once feared. That's the irony of divine blessings. They are born not in noise, but in the quiet spaces where the soul finally listens. Every time life begins to shift, the first to panic is the ego. It fears losing control, because control is its illusion of safety. It tries to rebuild what's breaking, to chase what's leaving, to fix what isn't meant to be fixed. But according to Alan Watts, this is the root of human suffering, our inability to accept the transient nature of all things. He once said, "The more we struggle for life, the less we live." When God is about to bless you, He doesn't negotiate with your ego. He liberates you from it. And that liberation feels like loss until you realize it's freedom. The ego is loud. It whispers lies that sound like reason. You're falling behind. You're failing. You're being forgotten. But beneath that noise, the soul remains still. It doesn't panic because it knows that endings are not destruction. They're evolution. As the divine rearranges your life, what's truly you will not be lost. It will be revealed. You are not becoming something new. You are remembering what you've always been. Watts described this as waking up from the illusion of separateness. What leaves your life is not punishment. It's the removal of what kept you asleep. Surrendering the ego feels like dying, because in a way, it is. It's the death of who you thought you were, the identity built on fear, approval, and survival. And yet, only through this symbolic death can the soul truly breathe. When you stop clinging to the version of yourself that life no longer supports, you create space for the truth to emerge, that you were never incomplete to begin with. God doesn't add wholeness to your life. He removes the illusions that hide it. As the ego dissolves, peace returns, not because circumstances improve, but because your perception evolves. You begin to see that the divine is not something outside of you, but something moving through you. The shift that once felt external now feels internal. The same events that once triggered fear now invite reflection. What's often said that life is not happening to you, it's happening as you. The moment you accept that, your suffering transforms into understanding. And in that awakening, you realize the deepest truth of all. Nothing real can ever be lost. What is truly aligned with your essence will remain. What disappears was never yours to begin with. When you no longer fear the movement of life, you begin to dance with it. And in that dance, you discover the rhythm of grace itself. There's a moment in every breakdown when you feel like everything has gone too far to recover. The plans have collapsed, the people are gone, and the path ahead seems erased. But according to Alan Watts, the collapse is not a failure, it's an unveiling. The divine doesn't destroy for the sake of pain. It dismantles what's false so truth can emerge. When everything falls apart, you're closer to awakening than ever before, because only then do you stop pretending that control was ever real. The breakdown strips you bare. It removes the roles, the achievements, the distractions, until all that remains is you, standing in raw existence. It's terrifying, yes, but also holy. What's often said that we spend our lives trying to hold water in a sieve. We try to preserve what cannot be preserved. The breakdown forces you to stop trying, to finally see that you were never meant to hold life, only to experience it. In that surrender, your heart opens, and through the cracks of your pain, the light begins to enter. The irony is that the breakdown is often the most honest moment of your life. It shows you what's real, the friends who stay, the faith that endures, the love that asks for nothing in return. These are revealed in the ruins. The rest was illusion. And once you see that, you can never unsee it. The destruction becomes divine clarity. You realize that God was not absent in your darkest hour. He was the architect of a new beginning. Every sacred story begins with collapse. The seed must break to sprout. The caterpillar must dissolve to become the butterfly. The night must fall for the dawn to arrive. Watts would call this the necessity of opposites, that light and dark are not enemies, but partners in creation. So when everything in your life seems to be falling apart, remember, it's only falling into alignment. The blessing cannot come through what's rigid. It must come through what's been broken open. And in time, you will look back and see that the things you thought were ending were actually being transformed. The loss became the lesson. The confusion became the compass. The breakdown was never the end. It was the blessing in disguise, preparing you to receive what your old self could never have held. When the dust of your breakdown begins to settle, something quiet yet extraordinary starts to unfold. Life starts aligning itself in ways you could never have orchestrated. The right people appear, the right opportunities cross your path, and coincidences seem too precise to be random. Alan Watts often described this as the unseen intelligence of the universe, a pattern, an order, beneath all apparent chaos. It's the divine rhythm that's always been guiding you, now made visible because your resistance has finally been silenced. In this stage, trust deepens. You no longer chase what's leaving or force what's coming. You begin to flow, to move with life instead of against it. Watts would say that this is when one ceases to swim and begins to float. You realize that every struggle before was not wasted. It was refinement. God was never delaying your blessings. He was aligning your energy with the frequency of what you asked for. Blessings aren't given. They are revealed when your vibration matches their presence. The alignment feels different from effort. It carries ease, not exhaustion. You notice that your intuition sharpens. Decisions no longer feel forced but guided. The same situations that once triggered anxiety now pass through you like wind through open palms. That's when you begin to understand that peace was never something to achieve. It was something to remember. What's often emphasized at enlightenment is not an addition, but a realization. You don't become aligned. You simply awaken to the fact that you already were. In this new awareness, gratitude blooms naturally. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start saying, "Thank you for what it revealed." You see divine fingerprints in every detail, in the people who left, in the doors that closed, in the pain that pushed you inward. This gratitude transforms your perception completely. It opens your heart wider, allowing grace to move freely through your life. And as you align with that grace, the blessings that were once distant now begin to unfold effortlessly before you. And so, the invisible becomes visible. The chaos that once felt meaningless now appears as perfect order. The losses that once broke you now bless you. Life begins to move in harmony with your soul, not because it changed, but because you did. And when you reach this point of alignment, you finally understand the divine never shifted away from you. You were simply learning how to move with it. When the blessing finally arrives, it doesn't always come wrapped in light. Sometimes, it appears quietly, through peace rather than excitement, through clarity rather than applause. Alan Watts would call this the return to the ordinary. Yet it's anything but ordinary. It's sacred. After all the storms, after all the endings, you begin to feel whole again. Not because life became perfect, but because you stopped demanding perfection from it. The true blessing is not what you receive. It's who you become in the process. You have walked through fire and found that you do not burn. You've watched entire parts of your life crumble, only to realize that what remained was indestructible. This is the secret no one tells you about divine blessings. They are not external rewards, but internal awakenings. You no longer fear the shifting seasons because you've learned their language. You've seen how endings are disguised beginnings, how emptiness is divine preparation, and how silence speaks louder than certainty. Now, you move through life differently. There's no rush, no desperation, no clinging. You walk with the rhythm of trust. You've learned, as Watts taught, that to live fully is to be completely open to what comes. You don't chase blessings anymore. You embody them. Your very presence becomes a doorway through which grace enters the world. And that quiet peace, that effortless being, becomes your greatest testimony of faith. Everything that once terrified you, the loss, the waiting, the change, now feels sacred. You understand that when God shifts your surroundings, He's never taking something away. He's clearing space for your true self to emerge. The divine doesn't bless you after the storm. He blesses you through it. Every tear, every confusion, every surrender was part of your transformation. You didn't lose anything real. You shed what could no longer hold the light you now carry. And so, you stand in the newness of being, not as someone who survived change, but as someone reborn by it. Everything around you may have shifted, but within that shift, you found yourself, unshaken, timeless, infinite. That is the real blessing. To see that what you called everything falling apart was, in truth, God putting everything back together, exactly as it was always meant to be. There comes a moment, after the storms have passed and the silence has settled, when you finally see the truth hidden behind it all. You were never waiting for life to change. Life was waiting for you. Everything that fell apart was a sacred invitation to rise, to let go of who you were, and to step into who you were always meant to be. Alan Watts taught that transformation doesn't come from struggle, but from surrender, from trusting the flow of existence instead of fighting it. What once felt like loss now reveals itself as liberation. What once broke you now becomes the very thing that made you whole. The true blessing was never the new beginning itself, but the awakening that happened along the way. Every breakdown, every unanswered prayer, every closed door, all of it was part of the divine choreography aligning you with your higher self. You were never being punished. You were being purified. You were not being abandoned. You were being prepared. The chaos was not the end of your story. It was the rewriting of it. And now, standing on the other side of everything that tried to destroy you, you can see that every shift was grace in disguise. You have learned that when God is about to bless you, He first rearranges your world so that only what's real remains. You've learned that silence is not emptiness, but creation in progress. You've learned that peace isn't the absence of storms, but the stillness you find within them. And as Alan Watts often said, you are the universe experiencing itself. The divine has never been outside of you. It has always been expressing itself through you. That is why everything had to change, so that you could finally recognize that the light you were searching for is never lost. It was simply buried beneath what you were never meant to keep. So now, as your world begins to shift again, and it will, remember this. The movement around you is not meant to scare you, but to shape you. Don't cling. Don't resist. Trust the process, because every tremor is proof that the divine is near. Life is not falling apart. It is falling into alignment. Let the old dissolve without fear, because what's coming next is not random. It's a reflection of who you've become. The more you trust the shift, the more gracefully you'll dance through it. And if this message spoke to something inside you, if it reminded you that your storms are not punishments but preparations, then take a moment to stay connected. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment sharing what part of this truth resonated with you most, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Because just like you, they might be standing in the middle of their shift, not realizing that God is already building their blessing beneath their feet.